Please give me the $3 for the bread. Ma'am, either pay your money or leave the bread. Please, I will pay for her. Here is your $3 for the bread.
She had $3 left in her pocket, and she was about to give all of it away to a woman she had never met. She did not know that woman's name. She did not know that woman controlled a company worth more money than she would earn in 100 lifetimes. All she knew was that an old woman was standing at a cash register, humiliated in front of strangers, and something inside her refused to let that stand. What she did in the next 60 seconds would end her job by nightfall, and it would change the rest of her life forever. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Her name was Grace Bennett, and on the morning this story begins, she was 26 years old, mopping floors at Harvest Market for $9 an hour, and carrying a weight most people never see. Her mother was sick at home, the kind of sick that came with a stack of unpaid medical bills growing taller every month. Grace had a business degree from a community college she had scraped and borrowed her way through. But 2 years of job applications had taught her that a diploma without connections was just paper. So she pushed a mop instead, and she told herself that pride was a luxury she could not afford. What she did not know yet was that her character, the part of her nobody could put on a resume, was about to matter more than any job title ever could. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of ordinary day that never announces itself as the day everything changes. An elderly woman stood at the checkout line with a single loaf of bread, patting her coat pockets with growing panic. She had left her wallet at home. The cashier, a man named Frank Doyle who ran that register like it was his personal kingdom, was not interested in patience. He told her plainly that if she could not pay, she needed to step aside for the next customer. A few people in line began to whisper. One of them muttered that she was probably just trying to get something for free. The old woman's face went pale with the particular shame that only the elderly seemed to carry so visibly, the shame of losing control of a moment that should have been simple. Grace was near the front of the store, restocking a shelf, when she heard it. She did not think. She reached into her apron pocket where she kept exactly $3. Money she had been saving to make sure she had bus fare for the rest of the week, and she walked to the register. She set the money down and told Frank that would cover the bread. The old woman turned to her, stunned, and asked why a stranger would do such a thing for her. Grace told her that she looked hungry, and that nobody should ever have to feel ashamed for forgetting a wallet. The old woman asked her name. She said, "Grace Bennett." The old woman repeated it back slowly, as though she were pressing it into memory so it could never be erased. She said she would never forget that name. Neither of them knew yet how true that sentence would turn out to be. Word of what happened traveled through the store faster than Grace could finish her shift. By the time she was called into the back office, she already sensed something was wrong. Frank was waiting there with a folder in his hands and a look on his face that had already decided her fate before she sat down. He told her she had interfered with a customer transaction. He told her she had inserted herself into something that was none of her business. He called it grandstanding, using her position to override a management decision in front of a line of customers. Grace tried to explain that an old woman had been about to be walked out by security over a loaf of bread, and that buying it for her was not grandstanding, it was simply being human. Frank did not see it that way. He handed her a notice of indefinite suspension, effective immediately, and told her the rules were the rules. When she begged him to reconsider, telling him her mother needed her medication and that losing this job could break them, he told her the decision was final and that she could collect her last check on Friday. Grace walked home that evening replaying the moment over and over, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. She had no way of knowing that 3 miles across town, in a house far grander than anything she had ever set foot inside. An old woman named Margaret Whitfield was telling her daughter the exact same story from the opposite side. Margaret sat in her daughter's study that evening and described the whole afternoon in careful detail. She said she had forgotten her wallet, that the cashier had been prepared to have her escorted out, and that a young woman, a janitor by the look of her uniform, had stepped forward and paid with what looked like the last money in her pocket. Margaret's daughter, Catherine Whitfield, ran one of the largest development firms in the country, and her first instinct was practical. She offered to simply write a check and send it over as a thank you. Margaret stopped her immediately. She said that missed the entire point. That young woman had given away every dollar she had on her to a total stranger, without hesitation, without expecting anything in return. Margaret said that kind of choice reveals something about a person that money can never buy, and she wanted to find her, not to hand her cash, but to understand who she was. By the next afternoon, Margaret and Catherine arrived at the small apartment building where Grace lived with her mother. Grace answered the door in disbelief, certain at first that she was being asked to return the $3, or worse, that she was somehow in trouble for it. Margaret introduced herself properly this time and explained that she was not simply a stranger from the grocery store. She was the mother of Catherine Whitfield, and Catherine was there to make Grace an offer. They wanted her to join Whitfield Development as a management trainee under their executive development program. Grace assumed immediately there had been some mistake. She had no corporate experience, nothing beyond an unfinished internship years earlier and 2 years spent mopping floors. Margaret told her that skills could be taught to almost anyone, but the kind of integrity that leads a person to give away her last $3 to a stranger cannot be taught. It is either in a person or it is not, and Margaret wanted it in her company. Grace accepted, though she barely believed the words leaving her own mouth as she said yes. Her first morning at Whitfield Development felt like stepping into someone else's life. Marble floors, glass elevators, a name badge with her own name printed beside a title she still could not quite believe belonged to her. Not everyone welcomed her the way Margaret and Catherine had. Word spread quickly among the other trainees that she had been hired straight off a cleaning crew, and whispers followed her down every hallway. Some of them complained directly to human resources, questioning how a janitor with no business background had been placed among candidates with degrees from prestigious universities. Catherine addressed it herself, calling a meeting with the entire training class. She told them plainly that Grace had been selected because she demonstrated something no resume, no GPA, and no internship could prove. 2 days earlier, Grace had spent her last $3 on a stranger, without knowing who that stranger was, without expecting anything in return. And when her employer punished her for that act of kindness, she had not complained and she had not fought back. She had accepted the consequences with quiet dignity. Catherine told the room that her company measured people by their choices, not their pedigree, and that anyone with a problem with Grace's presence was welcome to bring it to her office directly. She suggested they spend less energy questioning how Grace arrived and more energy proving they deserved to be there themselves. Grace threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised even her. She told her mother some nights that she felt like she was running twice as fast just to catch up to people who had been given a head start their entire lives. Her mother reminded her gently to remember to breathe, and told her she was proud of her not for the job itself, but for who she was becoming while doing it. Among Grace's new colleagues was a man named Derek Holt, who had spent 8 years climbing the company ladder through long nights and sacrificed weekends. He watched Grace's rapid rise with a bitterness he could not name at first, until it curdled into something closer to resentment. He began quietly gathering information about her, hoping to find some flaw, some inconsistency in her story that would prove she did not belong. Grace's first true test came when Catherine assigned her as project director on the Kowalski Trust proposal, a development deal worth billions of dollars. Several senior staff objected outright, arguing that a trainee with only 6 months at the company had no business leading something of that scale. Catherine held firm, telling them Grace understood the communities this project was meant to serve in a way no MBA could teach. Grace visited those communities herself before drafting a single page of the proposal. She sat with residents and asked what they actually needed, rather than arriving with blueprints already finished. She heard about schools falling apart, hospitals 40 miles away, jobs that paid too little to survive on, and a simple desire to be treated as people rather than statistics in someone else's business plan. The night before the final presentation to the Kowalski family, Derek quietly altered the financial figures in Grace's files, hoping the error would embarrass her in front of the investors and end her rise for good. Grace stood in front of the Kowalski family the next morning and began her presentation with confidence, until she noticed the numbers on the screen did not match what she had personally verified days earlier. She stopped mid-sentence. She told the room plainly that there were errors in the projections in front of them, and that she could not continue with data she had not personally confirmed. She offered 48 hours to correct it, and said if the corrected numbers were still unsatisfactory, she would accept full responsibility herself. One of the investors told her that in 20 years of evaluating proposals, he had never once seen a presenter halt their own pitch over a concern for honesty. He said most companies would have hoped nobody noticed. He told her that was exactly why they wanted to move forward, and that she had shown more integrity in 5 minutes than most companies managed in 50 years. The internal investigation that followed traced the altered figures directly back to Derek. When Catherine confronted him, he finally admitted the truth, telling Grace through gritted teeth that he had worked 8 years for opportunities she had been handed within months, and that watching her rise while his own future stalled had eaten away at him until he stopped recognizing the person he used to be. Grace could have let him be dismissed without a second thought. Instead, she found him sitting alone at a small diner near the office that evening, and she sat down across from him. She told him she was not angry, not anymore, and that kindness was never something a person had to earn, it was something you simply chose to give. She told him she understood what it felt like to be so afraid of losing everything that you stop being the person you actually want to be. The Kowalski Trust deal closed successfully within the month, and Grace's name began appearing in industry publications, not for her title, but for what she represented, a story people wanted desperately to believe was still possible in the world. Catherine soon asked her to lead an entirely new division at the company, one focused on community development and social impact, overseeing every project the firm touched going forward. Grace hesitated, telling Catherine she had only been with the company a year, nowhere near long enough for a role of that size. Catherine told her that in that single year she had accomplished more than most executives managed in a decade, and that this was not charity, it was recognition of someone uniquely qualified to do work no traditional background could prepare a person for. The vote to approve her appointment came back nearly unanimous, with only one abstention from an older executive who had once mentored Derek. Even he could not deny what Grace had built in that short time. That same year, Margaret and Catherine gave Grace something she never expected, a home for her and her mother, fully paid, deed in both their names. Margaret told her it was not charity, it was investment, the same way Grace had once invested $3 in a stranger who needed it more than she did that day. A year to the day after that afternoon in the grocery store, Margaret hosted a gala she had started calling Bread Day, a celebration meant to happen every single year going forward, honoring the choice that had connected their lives. Grace stood on that stage and told the room that a year earlier she had been mopping floors with $3 in her pocket, a sick mother at home, and a dream that 2 years of rejection had nearly buried for good. She told them she had not given that money away because she was special or particularly good. She had given it away because in that moment, it was the only choice she could make and still live with herself afterward. She told the room she did not stand there as proof that good deeds are always rewarded. because they are not. She stood there as proof that goodness is its own reward, that helping someone even when you have almost nothing left is what makes people human in the first place. She told them not to wait until they had enough to be kind, because there is never truly enough. She told them not to wait until they were successful to be generous, because success was never a requirement for it. Give what you have, she said, and trust that the world finds its way back to you, not always in the way you expect, but it does. Grace still visits Harvest Market from time to time, and she still remembers the exact aisle where it all began. She sometimes tells people that she is not special, that she is simply lucky, but her mother has always corrected her gently on that point. It was never luck, her mother says. It was $3 and it was a choice and it changed everything.